But I wanted to, speaking of busts and draft picks, I thought this was particularly notable. So Michael Lombardi is a former general manager. He now has a podcast called the GM Shuffle. And I've never heard somebody this emphatically come out against one of these top draft picks. Not personally against him, but just against his style of play. So first, let's hear Lombardi talking about Anthony Richardson, basically about why it would be absurd if he was taken with a top pick.
I watch these college players, and to think that Anthony Richardson is worthy of a third or fourth pick in the draft isn't absurd. It's absurd squared. It's absurd squared. Like, it's not even, like, athletically, if we're running the Olympics, okay.
Yeah,
I get
100%.
it. You watch his tape, it's absurd to think that this young man's ready to play professional. It's not fair to the young man to play professional football. Mm-hmm. He's so far, he's 2 years away from being a year away.
Wow. That is not the narrative that's out there right now about Anthony Richardson. Perloff, you and I have been talking about now that the Panthers traded up to 1. Looks like Bryce Young, I think, is going to be the pick, or at least ESPN was reporting that Bryce Young's going to be the pick at 1. We thought Anthony Richardson is probably the second most intriguing prospect in this draft. Lombardi is saying it's ridiculous. He's 2 years away from being a year away. That's not someone you take with a top pick.
Yeah, I mean, there is a narrative out there that whoever drafts him might have to wait.
A year, though.
A year.
It was a year, not 2 years away from being a year away.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I saw a couple mock drafts where Richardson has fallen. Our buddy Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, dropped him 14 to the Patriots. And then CBSSports.com had him at 10 today, Will Brinson. So he started to fall a little bit. So this is how mock drafts work. Malik Willis, everybody was high on last year. Then at the very end, information came back, and he's falling. I think it sounds like to me that Lombardi is working off some information coming back that he's falling. But I also got the sense...
He's saying just the tape.
Yeah, but I'm also getting the sense that Lombardi thinks he's going to be overdrafted. I got this. I'm reading a little bit into this. That, hey, he's still going to be drafted high. A team's making a mistake. And we know why that happens because we saw the pro day workout. The difference between him and Malik Willis is he's gigantically huge.
Yeah.
Teams see that. They see the long throws. Coaches think they can fix that lack of production. It seems like the oldest problem in the NFL. I thought Lombardi was preemptively complaining that whoever took him too high. I didn't necessarily think that means he's going to fall in the third round. Lombardi's saying these teams fool themselves into these guys.
Yes.
And there's a lot of truth to that. But then again, there's a counter argument, which is Josh Allen. Because Josh Allen is all those things, and then he turned out to be good. The tape was bad, and then he turned out to be a good player. So it can work.
Yeah, Josh Allen just had a little more tape, though. Like, you know,
a few more games.
Games. But
he was pretty bad at Wyoming. He was pretty mixed.
Yeah, people blame that on receivers and stuff like that, which, by the way, you could say that about Anthony Richardson. We're not really talking about any of the Florida receivers really going high in this draft either. But, you know, the question about this is what front office really feels like they have time to actually develop him? Because we thought that a year, okay, you sit for a year behind Geno Smith. You sit for a year behind Jimmy Garoppolo. You sit for a year behind Derek Carr, whoever is going to be, right? Maybe that's a good spot for Anthony Richardson with somebody who has a starter already and he can sit. But this type of investment, not a lot of front offices, unless you're a really solid, like the Chiefs or, I mean, who's like an entrenched front office? Like someone who really has job security. It's rare you're going to pick a quarterback with a top 10 pick, let's say, and you're going to be around 4 years later to see whether or not they're actually panning out.
Well,
we talk about Joe Douglas with the Jets. We're like shocked that he might still have a job. Like Aaron Rodgers might be saving his job because Zach Wilson's so bad.
Right, but some teams, some lesser teams, she brought in new guys that are going to commit to them. Houston, I think, could easily wait. Like, what's the pressure on it? Nobody expects Houston.
Well, they fired 2 coaches in 2 years, right, so we don't think there's pressure, but
now they hired
history will say
D'Amico Ryans is so different, though. David Culley and Lovie Smith were lifers. They were both way older. I think D'Amico Ryans are so excited to get him. Also, I think they beat a bunch of other teams to get to him. So I think maybe I'm projecting Houston, who also picks at number 12. They could wait a year on Anthony Richardson. What do they care?
Well, but I think it's going to be more than a year. I think you might be waiting like 3 years.
Yeah.
In which case, then you're kind of blowing the whole having a guy on a rookie deal. Like that whole window thing starts to close.
I mean, come on. There's no way you're gonna have Anthony Richardson running like that and keep him on the bench. No way.
Well, that's another thing, right?
Yeah, you're gonna get him out there, and he's gonna be Justin Fields last year and run for 1,700 yards. There's just no, unless the guy you have there is pretty good. You might as well run with Anthony Richardson. We know how the NFL works.
Sorry,
right?
Mike McDaniel said Jerry Jones has job security. Yes, he does.
Jerry Jones.
He's a guy with job security.
Seattle has.
He will not fire himself.
Did you mention Seattle has Geno Smith, so they can wait a year.
Like Geno.
Detroit has Jared Goff. They can wait a year. Las Vegas has Jimmy Garoppolo. They can wait a year. Atlanta doesn't seem in any rush to do anything.
Listen,
why don't they wait a year?
If it was just a year, I'm with you on all of this stuff. But listen, I know it's just one guy's opinion, but 2 years away from being a year away.
Yeah,
That's not just waiting a year. And he's saying it's going to be a disservice to the guy to put him out there because he's not going to be ready. So,
yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that, but I don't think teams are as scared as he describes. I mean, okay, he compared him a lot to Malik Willis. Malik Willis, who I loved coming into the draft, he's 6 foot tall, probably ran a 4.55 40. Anthony Richardson is, what did he measure at? 6'5", and ran this crazy 4.5 40. Doesn't it remind you of just those, like when Michael Vick came in the NFL? Just sometimes guys are just so dazzling.
Yeah, Vick was a way better passer, though.
Not really.
At Virginia Tech.
Vick's numbers at Virginia Tech, look at those again. They're not very good. Well, I mean, that was an era when nobody threw, but I think.
He also, how many years did he start there?
2, I would guess.
At least a 2-year starter. I thought maybe it might have even been 3. 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. Can I play another clip for you from Lombardi?
Yeah.
Another clip from Lombardi, and this one has to do with not just Richardson, but also how Lamar Jackson ties into this whole thing.
The reason it slipped is because he didn't have an agent. He didn't have somebody out there campaigning for him. Trey Lance going third with never playing football is a ridiculous thing. It's as ridiculous as Anthony Richardson going third or fourth. It makes no sense at all. You've got to be able to bring something to the table. And Lamar won the freaking Heisman Trophy. He was the best player in the ACC for 2 years. You know, I mean, and he's going 32, and we're talking about taking Anthony Richardson at 3, 4, 5. It makes no sense at all.
So that was a little bit of Lombardi tells a story about how Steve Bisciotti, the owner of the Ravens, was watching as Lamar Jackson was, not being selected in the first round, and told Ozzie Newsome, hey, we should go get this guy. And then Ozzie Newsome went up and got him, saying, because Lamar didn't have an agent even back then with the draft process, it hurt him. And he was a guy who did have all the bona fides, did have the Heisman, did have his 2 years, or his 2 great years at Louisville, and he slipped, yet Trey Lance and Anthony Richardson are these big-time projects that are going to be going high in the draft. Yeah. And how kind of crazy that is.
Yeah, it is. I get it. But regardless, teams don't necessarily think that way. There's something about this cheap contract that just changes. GMs go crazy for this lack of having to pay a guy. So
I know, but that's where this kind of doesn't square, because if you want a guy when he's cheap, then he's got to play.
Yeah, but I mean,
so to be a project and not get on the field right away, you're chipping away at all the cheap years of the contract, because look at what happens when you actually get too close to your contract ending. These contracts for quarterbacks are an obscene amount of money.
So obviously, whoever drafts Anthony Richardson is going to put him out there just for his running ability. So it's not like he's not going to play. Even Lombardi will admit that. And Malik Willis even played a little bit his injury.
And it looked bad.
Yeah, I still think he's a really intriguing prospect. I'm not as scared of him. I mean, obviously Lombardi's forgotten more football than we'll ever know. But I think, Lombardi probably has a track record of busts. Just like every other GM.
They all do. 855-212-4CBS, 855-212-4227. I also thought it was funny. Just Lamar not having an agent even back then hurt him. And it's obviously hurting him now with him and the Ravens being at this standoff.
Yeah, that's a great point.